right, welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra tidbits and details that I don't cover here on the show tonight. But while you're here, make sure you check out all the other shows we have here on the channel. Make sure you leave what you think down in the comments below, and make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's Hot 10, don't worry, I got you covered. It'll be running just after this.
Notable sales.
Okay, our first notable sale is a big one. Yes, this all-time classic, Incredible Hulk #1 in a super high grade in a 9.0. This beast sold for a monster amount at Heritage this past week. You can sit here and guess what you might think it might have been, but I don't know if you'll know that it's an all-time high for a 9.0 in that it sold for $312,000. That's right. Over $300,000. You can buy yourself a small home, or you can buy yourself a Hulk #1. Up to you, I guess. With that said, it is an impressive sale. It's an impressive book, and it's notable. It is what it is. It's notable, but it's not our only big sale of the week. This Heritage sale also had another big time book that sold. Granted, I might be a little bit biased because I'm a big fan of the character, but Silver Surfer #1. While not his first appearance, it is the first appearance of Shia LaBeouf, who will be the version of the Silver Surfer we're getting in the Fantastic Four movie. I doubt that's the reason why this sold at this price, considering this price is ridiculous, but it is worth noting what this book is. With that said, a CGC 9.8 also sold at Heritage this week. That's right, a 9.8 for this square-bound Silver Surfer book sold for another all-time high of $132,000. There it is, $132,000, which actually matches the previous all-time high. So it's kind of a duplicate high, if you will. But that one was back in January of last year. So the price hasn't gone up or dropped, but a 9.8 still commands a huge number. I mean, $132,000 for this book. It is quite impressive. It's a book. It's a book. I'm glad I have one. Not near a 9.8. Heck, I even have a detached page inside of mine, but it is what it is. You collect what you can collect, you buy what you can buy, and just be happy with what you got in your collection, is at least how I look at things. Now, with that all said, those were my two big notable sales for this week. I kind of went with a theme of more the classic book angle rather than some of the more recent, variants or, other angles we could have went with. So hopefully you found that kind of interesting. But we do have the Hot 10 coming. But before we get there, I want to remind any of you out there who need supplies, you can use my code, RENA10. You can also use the link below and save yourselves 10% off your entire order. Get yourself your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, CGC boxes, top loaders, pages for your cards, whatever you need to keep your comics and collectibles safe. You can probably find a product over at BCW and save yourself 10% off your entire order just by using that code RENA10. So you got to buy these supplies anyway. You might as well save some money while you do it. Now, with that said, we still do have the Hot 10 coming, and if you want to see it, don't worry, I'll be starting it up right now.
Number 10.
Okay, our first book is a classic. Well, a facsimile of a classic, and sort of not really a facsimile either. I know, I have my little issues with the fact that they changed the covers on a facsimile reprint, but that doesn't mean the market doesn't want to pay a little extra for some of these. Star Wars #1. Yes, they did another facsimile this year. There's a foil version of it as well, if you want a shiny foil version. And then there's this 1 in 25 with new cover art by Jerry Ordway. This is a 1 in 25. It's pretty cool. I like it. I mean, it's Vader. It's calling back to an iconic moment within the movie. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just putting the term facsimile. Just call it a reprint. It's, I get it. The rest of the book might be a facsimile, but you change the cover. It's not exactly the same now, is it? But with that said, only been out a couple of days, and already we've got over a dozen sales. It's averaging $35, hitting a high of $52. So hitting over double ratio already with one high sale on this book. So it is notable in what is otherwise a very weird week. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go through more books this week, but it's a very interesting list I think I have for you, in that we could argue all we want about positioning because there was no real major standout this week. But before we get into what's later on the list, let's just get to our very next book, which is number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 is also a new book this week. This is G.I. Joe, a silent issue, a silent special featuring Jinx. Right now, G.I. Joe, a real American hero, in honor of the anniversary of G.I. Joe issue 21, which they did a facsimile reprint of that just a couple of weeks ago. They're doing other silent issue specials for a number of G.I. Joe characters, 5 being that number. And with those 5 characters, they're all getting a 1 in 25 foil incentive featuring one of the letters that, when put together, will spell out G.I. Joe. Clever, right? We've already had the Beachhead. That was the G. Not much really happened with that book when it came out, but Jinx coming in with the letter I. We've seen about a dozen sales on this one, and it's averaging $36 with multiple high sales around $50 as the week went on. So more interest here in the Jinx character than, I guess, Beachhead. Be that as it may, I'm curious to see what this interest will do, not only with the Beachhead issue that's already been released, but for the future issues of this run, because we still have 3 more coming, 3 more specials with 3 more 1 in 25. So if people want to build out this set, they've got a lot more work to do. But it could end up getting pricey if this starts to be the trend. It's only been a couple of days. Maybe these are outlier sales. Who knows? We'll see. But so far, this little standout has earned itself here a spot here at the bottom of the list at number 9. Now, with that said, let's keep things rolling and get on to our next book.
Number 8.
And our next book is a repeat that has dropped down from that number 1 spot all the way here to number 8. This is the all-new Venom Surprise Clayton Crane cover, where it's showing that Mary Jane is, in fact, our all-new Venom. Sorry if this spoils things again for you, but considering it was on the list last week, you should have known about this already. Point being, volumes have dropped considerably, probably about half, thereabouts, which in normal cases you would say, well, half the volume, why is it still on the hot list? Even at half volume, this book is still outselling a lot of other books that are on the list or had potential to be on the list. So with 70 plus sales still on this book, that is still a big mover on the market and still a high volume book. With that, the price also didn't drop. It actually went up a tad, just 7%, up to $48, where the average last week was $45. It is still hanging in there, if not creeping up a little bit in price. So it's just been more consistent as far as pricing goes, because this week's high is less than last week's high. I think last week we had high, 95? This week's high is only 75, but that doesn't mean this book is realistic cooling down. It's more things are kind of evening out. We don't have those $20 sales balancing out with those $90 sales. Now everything's more consistently in that $40 to $50 kind of range. So it's just kind of becoming more consistent, if you will. And again, at this volume with over 70 sales, it's still notable and still earns a spot here on the list, even if it is down here at number 8 per my positioning. Again, we can argue where this belongs. Maybe you guys think this should be higher on the list because these numbers still may be better than some of the other books we have, or maybe not. Maybe you think this shouldn't be here at all. Put it in the comments. Let's have a conversation. But before we do that, let me finish this list and let you think about it and, kind of take it all in before you come in through with your comments. But first, let's get into our lucky number 7.
Number 7.
And number 7 is another repeat for this week, and this is Amazing Spider-Man number 546, which was our number 2 book last week, but here ends up at number 7, a bit higher than our number 1 book. And why is it higher than our number 1 book? Well, even though this also had a drop in volume, it maintained a little bit better, and the price went up a little bit more, as you can see here with over 80 sales. Last week, both books had over 140 that I tracked. This one had a better hold, going in about 80 plus sales, which is still a significant decrease in volume, but still a big number, more so than a lot of other books out there selling right now. With that, the average has also gone up 20% to $24, where it was only $20 last week. And then a CGC 9.8, just for extra context, sold this week for $225. This brand new day is still moving books on the market, as we are getting even more news and rumors related to it. Now, the most recent thing I read was that Sadie Sink might actually be playing Sarah Errett, or I don't know how you pronounce her name. The original Jackpot. There's a chance she could be playing that character, which was also a character heavily involved in this brand new day storyline. Again, I don't expect a 1-for-1, matchup, adaptation in any way, but they may pick and choose pieces. Maybe we see a Mr. Negative. Maybe we see a Jackpot introduced in this series. I don't know. None of us know for certain yet. It's still a lot of rumors and speculation, but with that title for the movie being Brand New Day, a lot of folks still are going back to grab this book, and those prices are still inching up a little bit higher with this volume of sales. That said, that's our number 7. We still got more books on the way, so let's keep it rolling and see what we got at number 6.
Number 6.
Non-movie related, let's look at Amazing Spider-Man number 238. Yes, the classic first appearance of Hobgoblin. Roderick Kingsley has returned. If you read, I'm sorry if you didn't read ASM number 1 this week. Sorry if I spoiled it, but he did return there at the back end of the issue, so we can expect to see a return of the original Hobgoblin, I'm assuming, in some way. At least that's what they're kind of alluding to. I mean, Roderick was there, his costume was there. I'm just kind of making the logical jump that he's putting that costume back on. But we'll see for certain how this new run on Amazing Spider-Man plays out. With that, this book has seen a lot of interest. I even had a viewer asking questions about this book because they were looking into one of these, and I got a few extra little details about that as we get into the numbers here. So issue 238 is selling with and without tattoos because, you know, this book does have the special tattoos. There are also newsstand editions. Those newsstands are actually more plentiful than the directs. I know there's a lot of newsstand collectors out there these days. They like the special idea of, well, it's rarer, the newsstand version, which is the case for more recent books. But you have to go back through the timeline. There was a time where newsstands were the marketplace for comic books completely. Like, there were no comic shops. And then eventually comic shops started opening, and then we got a direct market. But that transition didn't happen until the mid-'80s there. So this book in the early 80s was actually more like 80% newsstand to 20% direct. So don't automatically assume newsstands are always more rare. Just saying. You got to look at context. All of this stuff, you can go look it up for yourself and research it if you want. You can just Google it. It's not hard to find the info. With that said, this book is up 22% this week as far as volume goes, with that reveal that Roderick is back. 30 sales thereabouts on this. Overall average here, that number is a big number at $430, but that's taking into account graded sales as well as raw sales, because there are so many different ways this book can sell, whether it be graded, raw, with or without tattoos, newsstands, not in direct editions. There's a lot of different flavors of this book, so when you take them all together, you can see it's up slightly at $430 for the average, but more like you can find reader copies that might be missing the tattoos for like $30 to $50. Or you can find some mid grades, mid to high grades that might be, you know, with the tattoos or maybe even without, still getting like $200 to $300 raw. So prices are all over the place. The one standout 9/8 sale that I saw was an $1,800 sale that is actually just outside of our week. It was on April 2nd, but it's close enough. Other than that, the other 9/8 sales have been more in that $1,400 kind of range. But for whatever reason, on April 2nd, there was that $1,800 sale for a 9/8 of this book with the tattoos, mind you. That's how I'm looking for it. I still need one of these. I want the tattoos inside, but I don't like paying these prices personally. So I'll keep waiting. I'll keep hunting. I'll keep looking. I'm not quitting anytime soon, so I got time. And with that time, we still have the top half of the list, so let's keep it rolling and get in with number 5.
Number 5.
Climbing back onto the list once again, we have the Sentry number 1. Yes, we are inching ever closer to the release of Thunderbolts in May of this year. And we know Sentry, who's been featured more prominently in the more recent trailers, is both hero and villain in this feature. So we'll see how this all plays out. But he is definitely a focus of this storyline. So Sentry number 1, all covers of this are selling well. From this cover, you have the B cover, and you have the convention exclusive out there as well. All 3 of them are selling, but we're looking at the cover A mostly. We had a couple dozen sales, up 50% from last week, so we're seeing people getting excited now as we're nearing the release date. We're just weeks away now at this point. Averaging $90 still, so it's pretty close to its average, which has kind of fluctuated between $80 and $100 over the last year or two. So 90 is pretty much standard, so no real spikes there. It's really just the volume this week. But a 9/8 did hit a high of $389 this week, which some of the other 9/8 sales were only about $340, $350. So there was one standout for one reason or another. Point being, more people looking at this book, getting excited for this movie. Makes sense, right? With that, that is our number 5 book, so we will keep it rolling and come in with number 4.
Number 4.
Now, I told you about this one last week on the outside looking in to keep an eye on it because Netflix had just dropped that Devil May Cry series, the animated show, and it's been doing well. I think not like blazing, with record viewer numbers, but I think it's doing better than I thought it would have done as far as viewership goes because it is more of a niche video game title. I mean, it isn't one of the big. It's not like a Grand Theft Auto, if you will, or even an Assassin's Creed. Like Devil May Cry is more of a, not to say it's a hidden gem, but it's not a game that everyone, the mass audiences aren't aware of it. So I didn't know how well the animated show was going to do, but it's doing well enough that folks are buying all covers of this comic. This is the cover A, the one that's seeing the most sales. This is the Michael Turner cover. There's a Pat Lee cover. There's a video game variant. There's also a second print that's a black and white of the Pat Lee cover. Multiple options on this one is what I'm trying to tell you. Multiple number one options. They're all selling pretty well. With that, prices have been kind of inconsistent, realistically, when you look at it, but volumes are up a ton from last week. Because I told you to keep an eye on it last week when there was only a few sales. This week, with a couple dozen sales, it's up 600% in volume, and it's averaging about $25. Now, that average of $25 is taking into account there are plenty of like $10 sales here and then $100 sales. That was the high outlier. There was one $100 sale, and then there's some $30 sales here, some $12 sales. Again, prices are kind of all over the place, and depending on the cover, it's not an apples to apples comparison. But just to give you broad strokes, this thing is selling. Anything you can find, if you can find it for cheap, would probably be worth picking up, because I don't know if this is done, because I don't know how much longer people will be paying attention to the Netflix show. Is this just a moment in time bump? Possibly, but we'll see. Time will tell as we see what happens next week. But for now, this was a big jump for this week, which puts it in at number 4. With that said, we still have the top 3 coming, so let's take a look and see what they are.
Number 3.
Indie comic option news. Bound to move books every time it happens. And yes, Sony is planning to adapt this Love Everlasting story by Tom King. Should be interesting. Should be interesting what they end up doing with this. That news that Sony's adapting it has caused this Love Everlasting book to start moving on the market. Unlike the Devil May Cry book, there are multiple cover options for this. There are multiple open order cover options as well as incentive options. And some of those incentives are selling for very cheap, but they are selling. Volumes are up. Volumes on this are up to over 60 sales I tracked since the announcement, with highs hitting $8 to $10. I mentioned that those are highs because most of the sales have only been cover price and even less. I've seen sales for $2, $1.50, etc. Multiple covers, a lot of sales on the lower end, but those higher marks start hitting 8 to 10. Who knows where it'll end up? Like I said, there are multiple cover options out there, but I've seen even 1 in 50 selling for only like $10 on this book. Does that mean they're going to stay down there? I don't know. Could they rise? Possibly. It's something to keep an eye on, but the volumes alone on this and those little bit of spikes have put this in a position to earn its spot at number 3. I told you, there was no real standout, so we can argue positioning all we want on this list, but we do have a lot of things moving. It's just kind of tough to tell where to place them. But I put this one in here at number 3. Now, with that said, we still got 2 books left, so let's see what we got.
Number 2.
Here's another book I told you about last week. This was also on the outside looking in because we had the Dark Knight book, the number 1, the first appearance of the White Rabbit on the list last week, but the cover appearance has always been more popular. We don't have to argue what this is. I'm not saying this is first full and that's a cameo. I'm not getting into semantics. She appeared in the first issue. She's on the cover of the 3rd issue. Most people like buying this issue for whatever reason, but this is the 3rd issue of that series. Batman, the Dark Knight, David Finch cover, that White Rabbit character that we know who will be showing up in the Peacemaker show this summer. We now have a date. It's in August. It was near the end of August, like August 20th or something like that, 21st. Anyway, the White Rabbit will be appearing in some facet on that show. With that, from last week's sales, when I told you to keep an eye on it, we've seen an increase of 414% with over 35 sales this past week, averaging about $15. High raws are about 30. A CGC 9.4 sold for $80. That's right, a 9.4 sold for $80. I didn't see any 9.8 sales this week, but a 9.4 sold, $80. Interesting. But with that said, it's just one of those things to keep an eye on. I've always looked for this book when digging in dollar bins because there's been plenty of them out there, and it is a cover that captures your eye. It does catch your attention. So I've always grabbed it for that reason. but I guess we got the added hook of the characters showing up in the Peacemaker show. But remember, there's been more than one White Rabbit, too, so we still don't know all of what's going to happen with that TV show appearance. And, just keep that in mind as well. With that said, this was our number 2 book, which leaves us with one option left. Let's see what we have.
And our number 1.
And I struggled with this, but I ended up putting Helverine number 5, the spoiler cover here, in at number 1. Why did I put this here? Well, apart from it being the first cover appearance of the Hell Hulk, yep, it seems that folks are not tired of Marvel mashups or Marvel spoiler covers, because this was a spoiler cover showing the Hell Hulk there on the cover. Alessandro Capuccio cover. Pretty nice. Kind of like it. Hell Hulk. I don't know a lot about the character. I'm going to be honest. But a lot of people are buying it this week. Last week, there were a ton of sales, but mostly were for cover. So the volumes were there, but it was a brand new book and was mostly selling for cover. I think at most it was selling for like $1 over a cover. It was like $6 here or there. Now, this week we had 40 plus sales. Average is about $14, which is up 180% in price from last week. That's why I put it here at the top, as well as the high hit $32 for one of these, which is a 357% increase from last week's high, which really wasn't that much. I told you, last week was mostly cover. There weren't a lot of big sales, but this week, more folks are going back and buying it. I guess Hell Hulk's a thing now. I guess this is a thing that everybody wants to go and find these new Marvel mashup characters and the spoiler covers to go with them. On that note, make sure you check out the Outside Looking In, because I got another book to keep an eye on, because it may perform similar to this one for next week. Who knows? We'll see how this all plays out. But this was the number 1 book, in my opinion, for this week. I told you, it's no real standout that really felt like this was the solid pick. So we could argue over positioning and order if we want. Do so in the comments down below. And with that, that is the list for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed that, but don't go anywhere. Make sure you stick around. The boys are starting up right after I'm done here with the Qualified. They're going to be covering 3 new artists that you should be keeping your eye on this year, as well as that Outside Looking In. Some books that missed out on this list, and some books that, like last week, I told you to keep an eye on, and then they ended up selling and finding their way onto the list this week. Not saying that's always going to happen, but you never know. That's why it's worth keeping an eye on these things. With that said, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you're enjoying the channel. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing it. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you all later with some more content. All right?